Alrighty y'all, this is World Class Jerk, and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 best methods for gathering bytes in Astroneer. Now today I was actually going to do a video on how to turn your soil into nanocarbon alloy until I realized that was going to be really difficult, so I decided to procrastinate that a little bit further, maybe till tomorrow or maybe indefinitely. But yes, I think it's no secret that I am slow, so perhaps there is actually a method better than one of the ones on this list, meaning that I did miss one of the best ones. However, I do believe that number 1 on this list is indeed the very best, and that you cannot argue with me otherwise, because I am always right, except for when I'm not. That being said, let's jump straight into this with the top 5 best methods for gathering bytes in Astroneer. Coming in at number 5 is going to be the Fractal Rolls strategy for gathering bytes. Now, I made a separate video on this particular item all by itself, so if you want to know the nitty-gritty details of it all, you can go watch that. But what I'm going to be covering here is basically just the gist of how you get bytes with this thing, and it is pretty simple. When you harvest this thing, it will drop a seed every single time. However, sometimes when you harvest it, it will drop a bytes thing with it, which I actually got that first try, which is nice. But yes, it drops a research sample with it, and you can get bytes from it. Now, obviously, 105 bytes for having to sit here and grow something and wait for it to grow really isn't all that great. So there is an extra detail to this, which is that it can indeed be automated, because everything on this list can be automated. If we're going over the top 5 strategies, obviously every single one of them is not going to require you to lift a finger. So we're going to need a delay repeater and a proximity repeater, which basically just means that every once in a while, this proximity repeater is going to go off all by itself, and we don't have to do anything to make that happen. And what happens is the proximity repeater is able to plant the seeds that are in its proximity, and it is also able to harvest plants in its proximity. And since this thing only drops 1 seed every time, it won't spread too much from the proximity repeater doing it, so it can just do it by itself, and the plants will never grow out of control. Therefore, you can do this forever. And also, the proximity repeater will research the byte sample whenever it harvests the plant. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Astronium. Now, there used to be a bug with Astronium where you could automatically make it so that the bytes on it reset, so you could actually research 1 piece of Astronium forever and ever. Now, that bug still exists because if you take this out, for example, and you put it inside of a canister like this, and bring it back out, then whenever you put it in the research chamber, its bytes will be reset. However, you cannot automate that part anymore. So you can still use the bug where filtering it through a canister resets its bytes so that you can research the same one forever, but you can't do that automatically because the auto arm will no longer take Astronium out of a research chamber, no matter what. However, regardless of the fact that this bug was removed, this is still a pretty good way to get bytes because it does 500 bytes for 1 piece of Astronium, but it does so very quickly. As you can see, 2.5 minutes to get 500 bytes. That's pretty dang quick, and you can get a lot of Astronium pretty easily in this game, at least after you're in like the mid to late game. So even without the bug, this still comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, my friends, is going to be the Glacial research item strategy. Now, this is the only one on this list that cannot be automated, but it's just so good that even though you can't automate it, it still made it onto number 3 of this list. Now, what happens is there are pyramid-looking things like this on Glacial, and every single one of them has one of these on the inside. Now, this is a research item. It might look kind of generic, but the thing about it is that it's really dang good. Because as you can see, we get a whopping 7,400 bytes for this research item right here. Just the one, and it's not that hard to get multiple of these. So even though there's a limited amount, and the more you find, the further out you have to go, it will be very good anyways, because just getting a few will still be worth your time. It only takes about 30 minutes at full power to research one of these, so it's a pretty crazy method for getting bytes. But there's a little bit more you still need to know about this. And that's that there is 3 different types of containers for this item. So as you can see right here, this is the first one I showed you. It takes ammonium, which I wish I was already on that resource here in the creative menu. Would have made this a lot smoother. But yes, this symbol right here on it means that it will be one that takes ammonium. So all of them that have that image means you put an ammonium on it just like this, and it will pop open. This is probably the easiest one to get into, but the other ones aren't so bad either. The other 2 types both require you to input power. This one requires you to sort of charge it, so you can put a very low amount of power in. As you can see, we're just putting in 1 unit of power a second, but that is enough because all it has to do is simply charge this bar all the way to full. You don't need to put in a lot of power, you just need to be able to put it in for a pretty good amount of time. And of course, just like that, whenever the bar fills up, it pops open just like the other one did, which leaves us with only 1 type of container left for getting this type of item, which would be this one right here. Now, as you can see by the symbol, it also wants us to put in power, but there is no charging bar to indicate how much power we need to put in. So it's actually not like the other one. You don't have to put in power for a consistent amount of time. You just have to put in a certain amount of power. So once you cross a certain threshold, which I always forget what it is, it will give you the bytes in return. So we have to connect all of these just like this, and obviously 4 units a second is enough. So we're just going to add another one right here, and as you can see, never mind. So it's 6 units a second. So obviously it doesn't have to be QT RTGs, but anything that will put in 6 units of power a second will immediately open this. You don't have to charge it in any way at all. As long as you put in 6 units of power a second for just a second, it will open this thing up. Coming in at number 2, my friends, is going to be the Glacial research samples. Not to be confused with research items. The research items are the large things you put in research chambers, and the research samples are the things you hold F on in order to get bytes from. Now, these a piece give you far less bytes than the research item strategy does, so why would I put it above the research item strategy? Well, there's actually 2 reasons. Well, actually 3 reasons, actually. The first reason, and the least important one technically, is that you can access these pretty easily in the early game. The moment you leave your home base, you can come to Glacial and just run tethers by these and get these, but that's really not so important because it doesn't take that much longer to access the items. The reason these really shine is because they respawn. So if you run a lot of tethers through the caves, these will reappear over the course of like 30 minutes, and then you can come right back immediately and get them again, which is pretty wild. But really the most important reason of all is that this can be automated, because as you can see right here, this, just like with the Fractal Rolls, can be activated with a proximity repeater, and then, you know, just put it on delay like that, and it will keep doing that, so that when it respawns, it'll just get researched again. Now, the Fractal Rolls has a significant weakness over this. Actually, it has 2 significant weaknesses. The first being that you actually have to go gather the seeds for the Fractal Rolls, and the second being that the Fractal Rolls does not work outside of render distance. So if you go outside of render distance with the Fractal Rolls strategy, it's just going to quit working, whereas this will work no matter where you are. In fact, at many points during some of my previous videos, you can see me randomly getting bytes, and that would be from this because I have this set up on Glacial, so even if I'm on a different planet, it still works. It works no matter where you are, and that is a giant edge over the Fractal Rolls strategy. In fact, the Fractal Rolls strategy would probably be above this one if it worked outside of render distance, just because Fractal Rolls seeds grow so fast. Coming in at number 1, my friends, is going to be the Methane Bite strategy. So what is that? Well, it's where you research methane. So why is this nice? Well, because methane's like, it costs nothing except for power. All you gotta do is whip up a base that makes methane in the atmospheric condenser, and that's literally it. You can just research it from there. Now, obviously, we want to automate this, so I've made a really redneck system here. That looks pretty garbage, but that doesn't matter because, well, I don't really care what you think. But no, yes, I just had to throw this together really quick so I could show you because I didn't want to take my time and be patient and all that stuff. So this is how it is. We are going to put 3 research chambers where all of them are in the range of a single auto arm that only picks up methane and puts it inside of them just like this. Now, you may be wondering, how do we automate research chambers? Because unlike the other platforms, they do not have like the circle thing right here that we press. Well, the way you automate them is by, well, let me turn this off. You have to make sure they are empty, and then you turn them on, and then they are automated. So if you turn them on while they're empty, they will research whatever lands in them automatically. So that's nice. That's something that really confused me at first. But now that my wisdom is here for you, you won't be confused. And from here, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory what's going to happen. The moment a methane thing appears on this platform, they're going to snatch it and research it. Now, I would like to quickly mention why I chose methane, because methane is worth 400 bytes, whereas helium is actually worth 500. So why did I choose methane instead? Well, that's because methane crafts 4 times faster than helium in the best case. So helium at its best is actually only where's it at? Helium, at its very best, is only worth 25 PPU. I don't know why I said worth. That doesn't make sense. 25 PPU is the most abundant. I can't talk. 25 PPU is the most abundant helium ever gets. So at its best, you're going to be getting it for 25 PPU. However, methane at its best is worth 100 PPU, so you will get it 4 times faster, but almost getting the same amount of bytes, rather. I wish I could speak. That'd be pretty cool. But yes, methane, it's slightly worse, but it crafts way faster, so you want to do that. And obviously, this base here doesn't have a lot of power, but if it did, you would be getting this much quicker. Now, as you can see, even with a garbage amount of power coming in, we're still getting 332 bytes a minute with just like, what is that, 2 RTGs back there and a couple of wind turbines. Pretty cheap setup indeed, so you don't really need a lot to make this one work really well. However, you might want to modify this to be more convenient for you, and I'll show you how right very now. Which is to do Argon instead. Now, Argon is only worth 300 bytes in the trade platform. I don't have any power, so the dramatic effect just went completely away when I pressed that start button. But yes, Argon is only worth 300 bytes a minute, whereas Methane is worth 400 bytes a minute, and they both have the same abundance, so why would you do Argon instead? Well, that would obviously be because you do want to come to Glacial as your first planet, most likely. This is the best place to land at first if you want to progress the game as quickly as possible, because there's a lot of bytes here, and there's also iron and titanium. Aatrox is where you have to go to get methane in an abundant enough way for it to be worth it, so you probably don't want to do that until a little bit later in the game. So if you want a method that's slightly worse, but available way earlier on, then I would do Argon instead, because really it's not that much worse, and you're going to be able to access it much sooner if you wisely choose to go to Glacial first. But that's really all I have to say for this one, and as usual, I'm a little too lazy for a proper outro, So instead, I'm just going to say, you better join my Discord. You better subscribe. Hit the like button. Leave a comment in the comment section, as long as it's not mean, because it hurts my feelings when people say mean stuff to me. So don't do that, because that's sad. And that would be sad. I'm running out of things, so just goodbye.